Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Walkshow podcast. This is your host, Walker Neer. On today's show, I discuss the book The Power of Habit with Misha Zarins. Misha has some personal insight into the concept of habit, both through finding a way to overcome depression and anxiety in his youth, and then also accomplishing some significant personal goals in recent years. It's a really fun conversation, and I think that you guys will really enjoy it. Before we hop into that discussion, I want to share a relevant tool quote to the conversation. This one actually comes from the track Invincible on the latest album Fear Inoculum. The lyrics are, "Tears in my eyes, chasing Ponce de Leon's phantom. So filled with hope, I can taste mythical fountains. False hope perhaps, but the truth never got in my way. Before now, feel the sting, feeling time bearing down." I really like the false hope perhaps, but the truth never got in my way before now. Feel the sting, feeling time bearing down. I like that little section because it really speaks to this idea that I counter often, and really especially within myself, where, I have thoughts like, oh, can I really do this? Or can I really change? Or am I really capable? And I guess just kind of the idea that my hope is false. But that in itself is actually a falsehood, right? Like the negative self-talk is already false. So since I've been willing to tell myself these negative falsehoods, such as I'm not good enough, I may as well actually just jump into telling myself positive things, even if I, don't necessarily believe them to be true. Because again, I'm already saying things to myself that aren't true. So the truth hasn't ever gotten in my way before now, is I guess my point. And in the end of it, time is not infinite, and limiting myself and my own happiness because I think I'm some warrior for the truth is just frankly, kind of absurd. Anyway, that's kind of the tool quote of the week for you there. So I highly recommend the album Fear Inoculum, and Invincible is a wonderful track that I really enjoy. As always, the music for this week's episode is produced by Misha Zarins. And let's jump into the conversation with Misha. Hey Misha, what's up, man? Welcome to the show.
What's going on, man?
Not a lot of. So something I wanted to talk to you about is I recently finished reading this book called The Power of Habit. I don't know who it's by. I'd have to look it up, but it's on Kindle, so I don't see the cover very often.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But anyway, it's a really, really interesting book that actually for me has connected kind of a lot of dots of other things that I've talked about on this show recently and just other books I've read recently. But so The Power of Habit talks about how it starts out talking about like individuals and how how habits actually work in the brain, and like even goes as far as to explain like what part of the brain habits are actually stored in.
Yeah.
And really tries to be very scientific in its explanation of how all that works.
Cool.
And then tells some individual stories. Like it tells a story of this guy who kind of, I don't know, I think he had a head injury, if I remember correctly, but regardless, basically he was like an Alzheimer's patient. I don't remember if he had Alzheimer's or not, but okay. You people can read the book if you're interested. But anyway, he can't remember anything. He's had this, he lives with this symptom for like 20 years, and the whole time thinks that he's the age that he was when it started, because he just doesn't have a memory past that point, really.
Yeah.
So like his daughter will come to visit, and she'll stop and talk to him, and then go in the other room and talk to her mom, and then she'll leave, and he'll get offended because he thinks that she didn't talk to him. Yeah. Because he just sees her leaving and doesn't remember. So it's that significant.
Yeah. Okay.
Or that big of a deal.
Oh, that's awful.
It is. But he can he goes for walks every day and goes and walks around the block, but he can't tell you which house is his, but he always gets home.
Okay.
But it's because of the habits. It's because there's these little cues that he's not even consciously considering,
of course,
that tell him how to get to his house that he can't really replicate and explain.
Yeah.
And they do a bunch of tests with him, these doctors, to try and understand how his mind is working. anyway, so it just is trying to illustrate, like, again, how ingrained habits actually are and how powerful they are, even independent of you being able to consciously think and rationalize things. Or it shares this story about a girl who has chewed her fingernails chronically for her whole life, and like to the point where she can't get dates because she goes on a date and then like inevitably is chewing her fingernails, and it's like
Oh my
very
God.
bizarre, you know.
That's awful.
And so in the book they talk about how, you know, habits are really like there's a cue, and then there's action, and then there's a result.
Mm-hmm.
And so and that's the loop of the habit. And so like in that girl's example, she works with a doctor, and they go backwards to understand, like, well, what is it that you're really trying to, why, when you chew your fingernails, what's the actual cue for that? And so they have her like take a week, and every time she wants to do it, write down what she's feeling or whatever. And so she comes to realize that actually what happens is she just gets bored, and chewing her fingernails is a habit that she's developed that's like this ability to do something that's stimulating, basically. And so that's really all it is. And so then once she figures that out, then she understands when that trigger, that cue happens, she's able to replace the behavior, and within a month she doesn't chew her fingernails anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
So also, the book kind of demonstrates how malleable habits are, even if they're really long-term habits. And there's a few other examples in that part, but that's like the beginning of the book. And sorry, I'm just going to explain the book for a minute here, so a little monologue, but
no, that's fascinating. So yeah, go for
and
it.
so then it goes into like organizational, like in a more business corporate kind of sense, and how habits influence that arena. So it talks about like this aluminum company that's like an aluminum smelting and processing company, and in the 80s they get this new CEO, and he insists on making safety the number one priority of the company. And everyone thinks he's crazy because, like, that's not... The CEO is there to bring in profit and increase the business, you know what I mean? Not to... I mean, not that safety wouldn't be a priority, but to say that it's the... I mean, he goes into the shareholder meeting as like, this is our number one focus, this is the only thing we're going to focus on.
I mean, in the company that I work for, that is a huge, like, campaign that they've made, like, sweepingly, overly wide. It had some bad PR in the past couple of years. I'll just say
Sure.
that and leave it at that.
Sure.
I don't want to say it specifically.
Sure.
But, like, that is a huge, like, concern. And they want to make sure that, I mean, it costs the company money if they have to deal with it. So, you know, like, I totally get it. But, yeah, not to cut you off.
No. You're welcome to interject. I didn't mean don't.
No. Yeah. Keep going.
But anyway, so, you know, and this is again, it's aluminum smelting, so there's, you know, molten metals, and it's just a dangerous environment, and it's not like people were dying left and right. So the rest of the company was kind of like, I don't know, man, I think there's just some assumed risk that comes with this kind of work, you know, like we're not going to be able to prevent all things. And he insists that no, that's not true. And what it does is, it certainly reduces the company's liability and whatever. But it also gets the workers to buy in a lot more because they feel like the company actually cares about their personal safety, which is pretty important to people, right?
Yes.
So anyway, so the way the book explains it is it's basically a keystone habit is what he calls what they refer to as this habit of this safety thing. And so as a result, though, of making safety this top priority, the side effect, if you will, of that is that it actually forces the company to completely redesign almost all of its processes. So now not only are they concerned about safety, but like equipment is updated and fixed, and employees are really encouraged if there's an issue, shut the equipment down, report the issue, you know, whereas before...
Standardize work formats for how you're actually working, like use these particular types of equipment to perform your job, and safety glasses and helmets and all kinds of stuff.
Right. And don't feel like if we're going to get behind on an order because the machine shuts down, like the priority is that we're safe, not that the order gets done, which is inverse of how it was prior to that.
Right.
But what it also does, because he requires that any safety issue, and this is a global company, any safety issue that happens, any incident that happens, he has to know about it the next morning. And if he doesn't know about it, he fires whoever the manager is that was over that.
Wow.
Well, so what? And he's a CEO. So what that means is that the communication plan of the company completely changes, because now, if there's an incident, the immediate supervisor has to know immediately. He has to be able to tell his boss, who has to be able to tell his boss up the chain, and that communication has to happen very quickly. So they had to redesign the way that they communicated with each other, even, which certainly serves the purpose of the safety, but it also just actually streamlined communication for the whole company in every other capacity as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the company actually becomes way more profitable than it ever was before, and has this greater success, and has no injuries and deaths anymore, which is great.
Right.
So anyway, that was just another that was one of the organizational. They also talk about the retailer Target, and how they hired this mathematician or whatever, basically, who looks for patterns in data.
Sure.
And I guess it turns out that parents of newborns are like the land of milk and honey for retailers, because they're more willing to spend than any other time in their life, really.
Oh, yeah, right.
And because of all of the extra stuff that they now have on their plate, if they can get everything at one place, then they're likely to do that. So for a place like Walmart or Target that sells everything, that's the gold mine, right?
Right.
So they hire this guy to see, because at Target they actually have a guest profile, that they call it, for every customer. And they actually have him analyze the data to see if he can tell when women are pregnant, even if they have not announced this to anyone yet, or it's not like they're telling the company. And he's able to do that with like an 80% or 90% accuracy.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Well before their due date.
Yeah.
But it's all through looking at their buying habits and seeing what kinds of things they're buying and how those habits change. And it's not like it's, again, he can tell when they're like in the first 3 months of pregnancy. So they're not buying diapers yet, but they're buying like lotions, and they're buying different vitamins.
Supplements and
exactly.
Yep.
So it's just little things like that. Well, then it turns out that the women are pretty upset that the company is like spying on them like that, because that's kind of creepy and invasive. So then the way that they solve that is they send targeted ads to these expecting mothers, except they just sprinkle in random stuff. So like they might have formula and diapers and onesies, or I don't know, whatever baby stuff there is. Yeah. I'm not a baby guy, as we all know. But then they also put in like lawnmowers and just complete camping gear, just completely unrelated stuff. So that way the ad looks like, to the consumer, that it's just a random smattering of products that they have on sale, but it's not, But so again, just another way of explaining like how significant habits actually are, and how predictive things are through that. And there's a couple other of examples. It talks about like this hospital and how it didn't have intentional organizational habits, but habits are a thing where, whether you intend for them or not, you're going to have them, whether you're a person or an organization. And so in this hospital, they didn't set out to establish clear habits, so then bad habits emerged. And in a hospital, that's pretty fucked up, because it literally is life and death situations,
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so kind of explains how the problems that they encountered and how they got through that. And then towards the end of the book, it goes into talking about like social movements, and how like the civil rights movement specifically, how that was influenced by habits, and how that was and like how like Rosa Parks, for example, was not the first person to refuse to go on the back of the bus in Montgomery in that year. Other people had refused that, but Rosa Parks uniquely had all these social ties across the community. So when she was jailed, all of these people kind of came to her defense that they otherwise maybe wouldn't have for someone else. And how just all these little habits that people have socially can be incredibly powerful as well. And then kind of the end of the book was interesting. It shared two stories where there's this woman who's a chronic gambler and like loses everything, goes bankrupt. Her parents die. She gets like $1 million inheritance. She starts having panic attacks about her parents dying, and she stopped gambling at this point, but then decides to go to a casino to try and get away from this anxiety of her parents being dead. and then ends up gambling away her entire inheritance. Not in one shot, but...
Right.
But so she goes to court, and they argue, her defense argues that she's not in control. Like, these are habits that she doesn't have control over, so she shouldn't be accountable. And the judge is like...
She'd shoot her fingernails. I mean, that's what she's doing.
Right. And the judge is like, no, she's accountable. Well, then they tell the story of this guy in Britain who... he's camping with his wife in an RV, and there's like some like, I don't know, kids, I don't know, they're not children though, like young people, 20 somethings or whatever, that they think that this couple in the RV thinks are harassing them. So they, in the middle of the night, they move the RV to another location on the campsite to get away from these people. Well, then the guy wakes up, and one of the 20 somethings is in the RV and is on top of his wife. So he just starts choking the guy. And the attacker is like trying to resist him, and he just won't let go and doesn't let go till the guy stops moving. Well, then once the guy stops moving, he kind of comes to and realizes that there is no guy, and he just choked his wife to death.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Wow.
And calls 911 immediately and was like, oh my god, I just killed my, and like beside himself,
Yeah.
Well, it turns out he suffers from, it's like a cousin of sleepwalking, but it's actually called sleep terrors. And
like night terrors. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's where... Again, it's like sleepwalking where you're not conscious except that you perceive that something really bad is happening, and then your habits kick in to like defend yourself or defend your loved one or whatever, right? Sure. And so he goes to court and he's actually acquitted. And so then the book poses the question, well, why does that guy who's a murderer, he's not accountable for his habit, but then this woman who goes bankrupt is accountable for her habit that she can't control, right? But the book concludes that, at least this author, and I agree with his sentiment, that the reason that is just is because the guy with the sleep terrors had no idea that was possible, and so had no idea that was even something to prepare for, so it wasn't really possible that he could have accounted for it.
Right. He wasn't observing his actions as they were happening and just being like, I can't believe this is happening, until it was the actual moment that it did happen.
Yeah, and I mean, he had a history of sleepwalking for his whole life,
right.
But it had never manifested in something like that.
Sure.
So there was no idea that, like, hey, you need to be prepared to not, to lock yourself in your room or something until you're, I don't know, whatever. I don't know what remedy there would be, but...
Yeah.
But with the gambling addict, like, she knew for a long time that this was her issue and knew what the triggers were and whatever,
right,
and didn't actually really take any actions to try and fix it.
Can you remedy sleep terrors or night terrors as a habit to undo? Like, I don't know. I'm not a...
Well, and that's not really I don't know. And right. Really the habit part of it was really the reactions he had to defend his wife from the perceived attacker,
Yeah, right.
And like, again, I have no idea what the remedy for that could be even.
Yeah, because people suffer from sleep paralysis too.
Yeah.
And perceive like actually visually seeing like demons and like aliens and like dark manifestations of objects, and actually have physically like it feels like someone's sitting on their chest and like holding them down. Like, incredibly weird that you can have this imaginary experience as a result, and then that's just I don't know how you like remedy that.
Yeah,
it's
right.
crazy.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, not to
powerful.
Get off on a tangent, and probably this will be offensive to some people, and I don't mean it that way because I don't actually claim to know either, but that's actually why I'm kind of skeptical of a lot of like really religious or like kind of spiritual things.
Yeah.
Because to me it's like the mind,
paranormal things, which I guess you could lump that kind of together. But yeah.
But it's like the mystical type things. But it's like the mind is so powerful that people that have those experiences, I don't think they're lying. Like, I don't think they're making it up. I believe they experienced it.
I believe that they think that what they experienced was...
Well, it was real. They experienced it. They saw it, they heard it, they whatever. So it's not that I think that they're, full of it or something, as much as that it's like, I also just believe that the mind is insanely powerful and can create a reality that's not, which again, and we all get that. It's dreaming, right? We all have experienced this.
Right.
But again, I say that, and I do say that from I try and be humble about it, where it's like, at the same time, I'm not saying that I know for certain that those things aren't true. You know what I mean? Because I don't know.
Exactly. Well, and consciousness is such an underdeveloped scientific field that we don't understand really the power of what is going on.
Right.
There's still the ability of like parallel universes. There's the understanding of the multi-universe and how we're actually connected to there. There can be portals. There can be gateways. Like there's things about our world and our universe that we have no idea and cannot fathom upon.
Right.
But I'm skeptical of people that experience it certainly when they're sleeping. Like, because it's already been diagnosed as something that can happen of sleep paralysis.
Right.
You can wake up. You can see visions of things in your room. Now, what that is, I don't know. It probably is just a fabrication of your mind. But to put any kind of assessment on it is basically just a guess, because you don't know. You're just trying to classify and categorize what you're seeing as something that's happening.
Right. But yeah, so like I said, I don't mean that to attack people who, who are religious or who are spiritual or who have experiences that are outside of, my experience. Because again, I don't think that my experience is the exclusive one or the right one or the best one or whatever.
Sure.
And I also don't mean to belabor that point, but just, but I do think it's important to say that because, and not because I'm even worried about offending people, but just because I think that's something that people aren't willing to say enough. Like I would consider myself largely to be an atheist. But I guess to some extent I would have to concede that maybe it's agnostic. It's like a combination because I don't actually know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, absolutely.
And I think that people who insist on knowing one way or the other are equally wrong because you don't know. Like, you're welcome to believe what you believe, but you can't insist.
For me, as I put myself in that same camp, is that if it doesn't have definitive evidence, because science is our discovery of understanding nature, so if there is no evidence to support whatever argument that it is, then it's all just a hypothetical guess of just trying to categorize and compartmentalize what you're seeing so that it makes sense to you. Because as human beings, we don't like to leave things unexplained because it makes us feel vulnerable in our environment.
Right.
So it's like, what is that thing in the sky that I just saw that I have no idea what it is? It must be this. That way I can rest assured it's just this. It's not something weird, or I can just compartmentalize it of saying it's just a deity, or it's an alien, or whatever, and then I don't have to actually question it anymore.
Right.
Then I don't have to feel like I don't know my surroundings, because we have to feel comfortable
in our
surroundings.
Weather is certainly a crazy thing that could certainly produce that kind of phenomenon, especially in times where we didn't have the scientific tools to explain it.
Yeah.
But imagine seeing the Northern Lights in the 1500s,
Yeah.
How could you not think that something
exactly.
crazy? I mean, what?
Right.
It's so
they used
weird.
To think the sun was the god.
Right.
That's what they thought it was. Now we know it's just a giant ball of helium nuclear fusion. You know what I mean? It's just no. Once you understand what it is, then you understand what it is. There's proof. There's evidence. You can show that. But everything else is just and this is gonna sound like me being such an asshole, and I don't mean to sound it this way, but anybody that proposes religious experiences as an explanation of nature, I'm always just I like Lord of the Rings too. Yeah. And that's super passive aggressive, and I'm just poking fun. I'm not trying to be a dick, but it is just my point there is just I can make up stuff too. People around me can make up stuff.
Right.
We don't know. You don't know. You just firmly believe that the stuff that you've made up or that someone else made up and told you is real, and you're in that camp. And if that makes you feel better about your life, then fucking awesome, man. That's great. I mean, it's your life. Go for it. I'm not going to tell you how to live. But certainly from my perspective, it's it's just Harry Potter, man. That's all.
Right.
Wizards and magics.
But I will say, and now I'm completely off the subject of habits and the power of habit, which I will get back to because that's actually what I wanted to talk to you about on this. But, I will actually say, though, that I came to the realization actually through reading a fiction book, which was really surprising to me because I hadn't read fiction in a long time. And I guess I didn't start off with it this way. I just actually was getting bored trying to read fiction books and found stuff like Malcolm Gladwell was just much more interesting for me to read. And I could finish the book, so...
Yeah.
So, but I kind of developed in my head this idea that fiction is just dumb. I'm just not going to read that, and it's just a whatever.
Right.
And then I read this this fantasy trilogy called the Mistborn trilogy, which is it it is amazing. It's so much better than Game of Thrones. And I didn't actually watch the show. As you know, we read the books.
Yeah.
So I'm comparing it to that experience, which the books are unfinished. So for Game of Thrones lovers, which is apparently the whole planet, if you read the books, you'd be a lot more pissed off than you think you are about not liking the last episode. Like, how about having the 5th book come out and end on a cliffhanger that's bullshit?
Almost 10 years ago.
Right, which was 5 years. The first Game of Thrones book came out in 1996, folks.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, I'm off on so many tangents. That's the Walkshow for you. But anyway, so in reading this Mistborn trilogy, it like a central theme of it is actually belief and faith, but not faith in the sense of like, not specifically like Christian faith, which is how that word, at least in our neck of the woods, is used exclusively almost.
Yeah.
But it actually really made a point that I was, again, really surprised to get from a fiction book, but it's like, I actually feel like the fact that I don't have a religion or that I don't have some belief system that I can turn to is actually a really big shortcoming of mine. And not like I'm a loser for it or something, but just simply that like I'm actually not experiencing the full extent of, and this will sound really conceited, but I don't know how, but like of my potential power. Because if you have that belief and you have those things to turn to, it can carry you through some situations that you might not otherwise make it through,
Yeah, right.
Like,
I think that's why religious aspects tend to try and corner the morality market, as them's the one being like the shareholders and the ones that hold morality, because they assume if you don't have that in place, how could you possibly make a decision that actually benefits you as a person, because there's no reward at the end of it. And it's like, but that's not really why you would do that. Your motivation for being moral or ethical has nothing to do with what the end game is. To some people it probably would be, but I would consider that to be unethical.
Yeah, I to me it's actually not. It has nothing to do with morality. It's more probably to do with mortality. Like I have a friend who had a buddy that had cancer and got really sick and then got better and then got it again. But he was a really, really devout Christian. And through all of it, like when he first got sick, when he got better, when he got sick again and eventually unfortunately passed away from it, he was like super joyous and happy the entire time. And
cool.
But it was because of his faith that he had the strength and the capacity to understand it and perceive it the way that he did.
Absolutely.
And so it's like, when I look at that situation, like, whether or not I think his religion is accurate or not, when we really talk about the brass tacks of it, like, does it matter? Because what really matters is that despite him facing these horrible things, he was still able to be happy and be filled with joy in the face of something terrible.
Yeah, definitely.
So it doesn't matter if it's right or not. It's that powerful, and that's the value of it. So
it's your perception which is dictating your life.
Right.
Your life is revolving around how you want. If it makes you feel better because you want to just compartmentalize this into making your environment more comfortable by defining it as this, and that helps you put any kind of unease that you have in your mind about the world with that, then absolutely.
Right.
I remember a friend of mine had lost someone, and another friend of that person had said, I know that you're an atheist and you believe that that person is just gone, but I've lost people and I just can't really relate to you on that because I don't know how to live with myself if I don't think that those people are waiting for me on the other side.
Right.
I can't just accept and go on with my life thinking that I'll never see them again.
Right.
I have to feel like they're there with me constantly, just in like in a different realm or in a different format, and I just have 20 more years before I get to go hang out with them. You know what I mean? It's like that. It's a very tough thing for people to just be like, this is it, this is all I got, and that's it. And for me, I'm way more, I push myself harder in my life because I'm an atheist. Because for me, I believe that this is it. It's done. Whenever I'm gone, lights out, nothing happens, like that's it.
Right.
So I'm going to make the most of this here because the power of being happy in life is so incredibly rewarding that when I used to go through depression and anxiety, that was when I realized, that was kind of the beginning of when I started to understand that religion for me is metaphors, because hell was already there and I was in it. And that was my mindset. And I was like, this has to be it, because my reality right now is hell. This is what they're talking about. If you perceive self-indulgence constantly in a negative fashion, you will punish yourself. And the oldest, story that I was ever told about hell is that people walk in openly to hell and can't get out. They believe they deserve to go there. They want to be punished because they feel guilty about what they've done. It's like, that is all, for me, a giant metaphor into like how you actually go through depression and anxiety and develop that as a habit. It's like, you are just not trying to walk into this situation thinking that, but you believe that you should be there.
Yeah.
Because you can't perceive things to be different.
Right.
And this habit just constantly reinforces yourself, but you don't know that that's happening.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I would say that I used to firmly believe that, like, oh, absolutely nothing happens after this. And really the conclusion that I've come to now is just that I don't know, and I don't believe that anyone else knows what happens at the end of all this.
That's why.
So it's more just that, like, I have no idea what will happen when I die, and I don't think that there's any way for me to control it because I can't anticipate it.
Sure.
So I may as well act as if nothing else is going to happen because I don't know. And if I'm wrong and there turns out to be this afterlife or reincarnation or whatever, dope.
It was
like
the,
super happy with it.
argument that Bill Nye and whatever the creationists, their little debate was, and he was like, "What's going to change your position on creationism, Mr. Creationism guy?" And
Ken
he was
Ham.
like, "Nothing." Ken Ham. He was like, absolutely nothing will shake my faith. And then they asked Bill Nye, like, well, what do you think would change your position on it? And he was like, evidence.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that really is it. And I don't believe that lights out after I die because that's what happens. It's just, that's up until this point, all we know happens.
Right.
We have no evidence to suggest otherwise.
Right.
So for me to pretend that it's not that is just me being naive to the truth, which is, I'm here right now, I have power of choice, and all I know is what's in front of me.
I guess the only place I would disagree, and certainly for you yourself, that all makes sense and that's
Absolutely,
true.
Yeah. It's all just your answer to the question, what am I doing here and how is this environment?
But I don't think that it's always, again, for you could perceive it as being naivety, but for someone else, again, like that dude that I talked about with the cancer story, I don't think he's being naive to think that there's something else, because in that case, that belief is what's actually fueling him to be able to live his best life. You know what I mean?
It's totally perception.
Right.
And I don't mean to sound like a condescending jackass. But for some people, I was previously married, and my previous mother-in-law told me, God is a crutch. Some people need it, some people don't. Like, those words just always rang true for me, because at the time I didn't really think about it, and she was just kind of dismissive. And that is a very,
it's a very pessimistic way to say it. And
it really is.
It's condescending.
Yeah, no, it totally is.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm better than you because I don't need that, or whatever. But it's like, whatever you need to do to get you to a place where you're comfortable with your life is all that matters.
Yeah.
If it takes you going to church Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday, doing youth groups, doing whatever, like, if that's your life and you are incredibly happy doing that and you're comfortable with your choices, then do it. Like, don't ever listen to anybody else tell you that you're wrong because you're doing that. Like, I just personally have to answer that question just like everyone else does, where it's like, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing here?
Right.
And it just makes sense for me to be in the position that I'm in, which is probably why I'm an engineer.
Yeah, I've really tried to, over the last several years to lighten my position, because I used to absolutely be the, like, oh, it's a crutch, and and always be really condescending about religion. And I don't know, it definitely over the last few years has just become aware to me that I was just being arrogant. And again, not that that's where you were in your explanation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally living that life, man. Like, if it works for you, awesome. Please just don't tell me how to live, and I will do the same. I will tell you how to live. Like, go for it. And you like Buddhism? Knock yourself
Well, the
out.
thing is that, and for people who are from this area, they'll get it. But for people who aren't from this part of the country, which is Missouri, we just live in the Bible Belt. And so for you and I personally, we've grown up where we are the outsiders for not being Christians. We are, and it's very much ingrained. I mean, there's literally a church like every couple of blocks in this town,
Right.
So we also just have a stronger, like, defense or wall up against, like, hey, like, I'm going to almost kind of attack that because I feel like it's been attacking me this whole time.
Yeah.
But I think if we were from like a really, and not a city even, but just any other part of, like when I went to upstate New York, it was rural, it was small towns, but there was like 2 churches, you know what I mean? It's just not the same level of embedded into that culture as it is here.
Yeah. Right.
So I explain that just so that people kind of understand where we're coming from, or our perspective on this is like it's different growing up here and being from here, where it is, through and through embedded in every part of the community. And we kind of got off on a tangent there. We, to help people track where we were, talking about habits, the power of habits, and then that went into the story about the guy with night terrors or sleep terrors or whatever it was, and then that went into just kind of the power of the mind, and that turned into religious conversation. But I want to bring it back to the habit stuff because it's for a long time I have struggled so much with discipline and consistency, and I always thought it was like just a character flaw almost or something. And recently I read a book called Discipline is Freedom, and that really kind of helped me understand the power. The reason it's called that is because it's like if you have discipline, you can be free from a lot of anxiety, right? Because if you have the discipline to just do routines and do a checklist of whatever task or something, then you have an opportunity to be free of these worries. And so that made sense to me. And then I read this Power of Habit book, and it kind of, obviously talks about the power of habits. And something that I didn't really touch on yet that it really emphasizes throughout the book is that actually the real central component to all of it, beyond understanding how it works in the brain and beyond understanding how a habit loop works and all of that, is actually just belief. So I guess it does kind of tie back to the religion conversation in a little way, but it's actually that you just have to actually believe that the habits can change, and you have to believe that things can be different. So they talk about like AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, in the book, and how a lot of the steps in the 12-step program don't line up with what researchers would say you should do to change habits, right? But one thing that AA does is it actually asks you to believe in a higher power. It doesn't actually say God or Jesus or anything like that.
Or acknowledge a higher power. Or
right.
Something like that, yeah.
But so what it actually bakes into all of the 12 steps is really trying to help you believe that things can change.
Yes.
And so when I say it's connected the dots, it's like, so in the last couple of months, I have actually established a lot of new habits and routines. And it started with discipline because they weren't habits. So it had to just be an act of discipline to engage in these things daily, right? But what I've found now is that since I've actually had, a good couple of months at it, and not that I'm at the mountaintop now, and not that I don't think it's still vulnerable and fragile. It is, so not that like I've mastered it, on to the next, that's not the case. But I'm already finding that it feels less and less like discipline. Like I used to always say, how does willpower actually work? Like if you ask me to get up in the morning and go for a run, like I'm hitting the snooze, or I'm curling back up in the bed. But if you take like someone who's like an Olympic athlete, which I get is a really extreme example because not everyone is that, but whatever, and you ask them to get up and run in the morning, there's not even a question. There's not even a thought. Like there's not any debate internally as to whether or not they're going to do it. They just go run. And I was like, how do they have that willpower? And what I've kind of come to from reading that Discipline is Freedom and now this book, and then also engaging in the experiences of trying to build habits myself, is that it's actually not a willpower thing. It's just a habit. They just have a habit of getting up and running, and it's so ingrained that they don't even think about it. It's just what they do. It's not because they're special or because they've found some trick. It's literally just because it's their routine, and that's what it is.
You and I had talked before we started actually recording the show about doing the show and what it was like in the creative process, and having this kind of like, it's my sandbox, and I want to be able to like influence all the elements in it and kind of look at it from every angle that I want to look at it from, because it's mine. It's my own creative space. And that's the way that I look at my time on this planet. It's going to sound kind of dorky, I guess, but like almost like a pie chart. If I look at a pie chart and that pie chart represents my day, then I get to look at cutting it into different slices of what I want to see and accomplish through that day. Whether or not I'm super good at that thing or I'm not good at that thing, I just think, I'm really interested in this, I'm really interested in this, I'm really interested in this, and I want to do this. Maybe I should start carving out slices of my day to do those things.
Right.
And then, like, when I started to do my undergrad in engineering, like, I was really terrified because I wasn't prepared.
I was terrified of your classwork in undergrad.
Yeah, man.
I didn't even.
Like, I had a list.
I'm not even there.
A class listing of what I was supposed to be taking my freshman year, and looking at the plan, the projected path for the whole time, and it was just like Physics 1, Physics 2, Calc 1, Calc 2, Calc 3, differential equation. I mean, all of this stuff that I was not prepared for to take, and had never done anything like this before. So it's like, yeah, can I cut it? Can I do any of this stuff? And we're at your house now, obviously, and I rode my bike over here, and there's a huge hill coming up to your house, and I was describing to you, like, the way that I accomplish that hill on my bike is to just put it into a momentum that makes sense for me to climb that hill, and then look in small increments at the ground right in front of me, and then just pedal with momentum and control my breath and control where I'm at in relative position towards the hill. Not how fast can I get to the top of it, how much longer do I have, but just if I maintain the momentum that I'm at, eventually I will get to the top of the hill. And that's all I had to do with engineering, was just like, let's just break it down into small increments and small problems that I can solve, and then just work my way through small problems, and then larger problems become solved because I've just solved a larger problem by dissecting into smaller problems. And that's how I just developed any kind of habit that I've ever done. Like, playing guitar, for example, like, I can't just shred, like, you know, Buckethead or like Kurt Hammett or whoever is like your favorite guitar player or whatever. But I can start doing techniques that they have, stepping my way through it very slowly, and then I just kind of do the same thing, just dissect it, a large problem, and look at an overall goal and cut it into smaller pieces of things that I can manage.
Right.
And everybody that I work with as an engineer always tells me that, like, this is a large project, this is going to take a lot of time, and it's really daunting. Just cut it down into the very first things that you need to do that are very easy, small tasks to accomplish, and just start working your way through it and checking it off. And you'll see over time that the larger project gets resolved because you cut it into smaller sections.
Yeah, I mean, really what you're talking about there is, you know, the idea of mindfulness and the idea of being in the moment. Some call it like a flow state is another way that it's referred to. But it's interesting, like I think I've talked about this on my other podcast, Pick Up Your Sticks, which is a video game podcast. But so there's Phil Jackson is the famous coach from the NBA. He was the Bulls coach when they won their 6 titles with Jordan and Pippen, and then he was the Lakers coach both when they won 3 titles with Kobe and Shaq, and then also when they won with Kobe and like Pau Gasol and some other guys a few years after that. And so he has this book called 11 Rings that is kind of a play on like the 5 Rings thing or whatever, the samurai book or whatever, the sword guy.
Okay, right.
Mushashi, or I don't know the name, something like that. Anyway, and so he what Phil Jackson does is he talks about how the way the book is laid out is he takes every championship team from all 11 championship seasons where he was the coach, and then kind of tells the story of like what challenges that team faced and how he tried to orchestrate that team to come together in order to win a championship. Because Phil Jackson's coaching style certainly involves X's and O's, and they watch tape, and he's famous for the triangle offense and trying to run that. So it's not that he doesn't employ tactics or strategy within basketball, but really his role and his key to success, as he explains it, is actually much more about teaching people that, getting people to be able to stay in the moment. So when you're in the game, you're not thinking about the last play or the next play. You're just thinking about where you are right now.
Yes.
And you're not thinking about what's going to happen at the end of this quarter, or are we going to go to overtime? You're just thinking about the play that you're in right now.
Yes.
And also, like, some really cool stuff, like where he would have the teams, you know, not every game, and I don't know how often, but he would have the teams, like, get together before a game and, like, shut the lights off and stand in a circle and hold hands.
Yeah.
And then all breathe until all of their breaths are synced.
Yeah.
So that way they're all, like, connected in that, you know, kind of on the same page.
Absolutely.
And so it's just interesting because it's exactly what you're talking about. I mean, you're not talking about with a team, you're talking about with yourself. But
I mean, that's what's crazy about it, is that the answer is so simple and it's so applicable to anything.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as I got done graduating with my engineering degree, and I had it, like, that sense of accomplishment was so fucking rewarding.
Yeah.
But what was amazing about it is that, like, I wasn't even focusing on the fact of relishing in this thing that I had accomplished, because I'd been doing it the whole time. So it didn't feel like I just got awarded a trophy for something I just did. It was more or less like, holy shit, I remember when I was super scared of this and afraid of this and you know, vulnerable to this, and I've made myself through it. Now, anything that I want to do, I can do, because I just proved to myself that I can do something incredibly difficult. And all I have to do is just start it, break it down into small steps and problems, and just keep working my way through it. You know, I mean, my brother kind of, like, succinctly put it whenever I was talking about it, is like, it's just work. Everything that you do is just work. Not like a job, not like
not going to work.
Not going to work. It's just effort. Like, you just choose to do that thing. Just do it. And then if you do it consistently, your brain will develop it as a habit. That's how I got into working out. I just found something that I like doing, and then I just did it continuously enough that I feel weird when I don't do it.
Right.
Then it's like, I should probably do that because it's good for me and because it's fun and I enjoy it. I don't not want to do it. Mm-hmm. Whereas before, it was like, I have to force myself to do it. I'm tired. I don't want to do that. And it's like, if you just put your emotional, mental state out of the mind, unless you're, like, injured or something, you know, or sick or whatever. But it's like, you really don't have any excuses. Just do it. Don't think about it. Just do it, because you're letting your conscious mind rest while your subconscious is developing habits.
Exactly.
So it becomes second nature for you just to do it.
That's exactly what I was trying to talk about with comparing it to, like, the discipline. It's like, when you first start, it is a matter of discipline to some extent, because you do have to just put it out your feelings and just do it. Right. But it doesn't take that long before you don't even have to do the discipline part anymore, because you don't feel bad about it anymore, because now it's a habit, like you just said, a routine.
Like, I used to hate running so bad. Like, I just despised it. And it's because every time I was meant to run, it was always go out and run a mile. Go do that and then come back. And it's like, but I can't run a mile because I don't run. Yeah. So I can run like 100 yards and then I'm winded and I have blood in the back of my throat, you know, the taste of metallic, you know. And it's because I'm not conditioned to do that. But when Bridget and I got together and she told me about her running strategy, it was take a 30-minute block of window, break it down into 5 minutes, and then you start running for however long you can run for in 5-minute intervals. So you do 5 minutes, you start off with like 30 seconds. Run for 30 seconds, take a break for a minute and a half, then run 30 seconds, then take a break for a minute and a half, then run 30 seconds, and then do that for 30 minutes, because you could probably do that. I mean, you could even do it in like 10 seconds. Whatever your endurance level is, you can match that. But then each like week or every couple weeks, you increase your rate and then shorten your resting time, and to the point where you can just run 30 minutes continuously, because you've worked your way up there because you rest appropriately and you condition yourself as a habit to the incremental level. And it was like, it's actually not, terrible. I actually kind of like running because I can do it appropriate level to my endurance level, not get out there, pussy, and run a mile. And it's like, I don't want to do that, and I hate this because I'm going to be miserable by the end of it, even if I make it there. Yeah. You know?
Well, so the reason that I really wanted to talk to you about this is because and it's funny because not that you need my validation or something like that at all, but a long time ago when we were 20, you suffered very badly, very acutely from depression and anxiety, which you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, clinically diagnosed.
And I've known you for before that, and obviously since then.
Yeah.
And I've had different. I don't know that I ever. Fortunately for me, I don't know that I ever suffered as greatly as like you or some other people that are close to me have from those things. But I've gone through some phases before where I get pretty down and whatever.
Sure.
And I remember talking to you. It was a few years ago where I felt I was feeling really bad, and I had developed some habits, frankly,
right,
that I didn't like and that I didn't think were my character. And I was talking to you about it, and I was like, I feel like I've gone crazy, like I've lost myself. I don't know. And you were like, you really haven't. Like it's just habits, man. Like you've just established patterns or habits that are doing these, but you are not your habits. You are not your patterns, and you can change those. And it made intellectual sense, but I didn't understand it. I wasn't able to apply it immediately. And eventually, I did actually do that. I did change my habits and then did feel way differently. But it wasn't like these last couple of months that I've been talking about. I've made a very intended effort and like very intentional decision about what habits I'm trying to establish. Whereas in that time, it kind of just serendipitously finally fucking thank God happened that I was able to change habits and get away from the cycle I was in.
Right.
But so I wanted to bring this up because now, again, it's only a couple months, so I don't mean to sound, again, like I'm coming from the mountaintop or something, but I now way more fully understand what you meant, and how true it is.
Sure.
But I think that, so I heard this thing on NPR. There's this guy that wrote a book about psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, and how it can be used to treat people with mental illness.
Yeah, I actually just watched a documentary called Mind Explained on Netflix, and it's a 4-part series, and it goes through like memory but anyway, they have an episode about psychedelics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's cool.
But yeah, so this guy talks about how, and it's limited. He doesn't have tens of thousands of patients or something, but so it's somewhat anecdotal, I guess you could say, but. Either way, he's had experiences with people who suffer from PTSD, and then people who suffer from depression and anxiety, where they're able to do literally a single time they do psilocybin, and come back out of it changed.
Yeah.
But it's because on the psilocybin it allows you to kind of detach emotionally.
Yes.
And so then it allows them to break that cycle and that pattern of stories that they're telling themselves, and gain a new perspective on it.
Right.
And it's crazy how, crazy is the wrong word to use, but how stigmatized psychedelics are, because people act like it's just a train to Crazyville. And it certainly can be if a person does way too much. Right. But it's not exclusively that, Like drunk people are way more scary to be around than someone
the
eating mushrooms.
documentary is actually incredibly fascinating because the person that developed it in like the 20s, I believe. And then it became clinically researched in the 60s, and it was like very heavily like treating people with terminal illnesses, treating people with PTSD, treating people with depression, all kinds of things. And it was like clinical data being gathered by many, many scientists that were like, this is amazing, you should do this. Because it was kind of like a one-pill answer. It was like, you can dose people. There was a guy that had severe alcoholism, and he was like, as soon as I took this pill, like, I was completely fine after that. I just had to gain, like, a new perspective on what I was doing, and I didn't even have the ability to, I don't have the desire to, like, drink anymore.
Right.
And then it was the hippie culture that was using it, like, recreationally, that the U.S. government felt like it became this, like, tool of use of kind of undermining
subversion.
Yeah, right. And so then it became outlawed, and they completely like cut out any kind of clinical research into it, and until like the previous, I don't know, probably 10 years, 15 years or something. Now that's kind of making its way back because it is so important. And like there's people that have terminal illnesses and debilitating diseases or habits or behaviors or whatever that can use this for gainful usefulness into making their lives better, and not even something they have to take consistently, like Oxycontin or something. It's like, this isn't, a remedy to make you forget and to just boost serotonin levels or give you a dopamine release. This is really giving you an ability to calm your emotions down, look at things from a more bird's eye view perspective on what you're doing, and then position yourself, like you said, around what you're actually doing.
Yeah.
Now, there's always going to be exceptions to that where not everyone's going to have that kind of reaction, but there are people that it's largely the case of the vast majority of people that it will help you doing that.
Right.
So it's cool. It's cool to see that coming back.
Well, so what I'd like to ask you to do now, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit, so certainly as much or as little as you want to share, but would you mind kind of walking through, what it was like? Because again, you had very severe depression and anxiety, and completely, rescued yourself from that.
Yeah.
As you just talked about, really culminating, I think, a long journey, but ultimately culminating in the life that you've now built for yourself, where you've got a great relationship with Bridget, and you've got a great career that's in a field that you find fascinating.
Absolutely.
But my understanding is that largely the way that happened was through habits and patterns and recognizing the power of that. So would you mind kind of walking us through what that looked like and what your experience was?
Yeah, right. I don't really remember precisely what the trigger was that kind of started it, but it was 19 to 23 in the age range of what that was the time. And when it first started, it was absolutely debilitating. Like, I couldn't do anything except lay in my bed and just wait for the next panic attack to come, and they would last for 30 seconds to a minute, but anybody that's ever had a panic attack will know, it's extremely exhausting. It's just like having an adrenaline dump. You just get super amped up, and then afterwards you're just completely wiped out. And that lasted, I don't remember the time frame, but it was, 6 months probably, where I just couldn't do anything, couldn't work. Thankfully, I could stay with my parents at the time, that I could do that. But I just chain smoked and drank Dr. Pepper and just tried to watch TV, but I couldn't really do that. And I was trying to do things play piano, because I always wanted to play piano, or go for walks or stuff like that. But everything seemed to be a trigger into depression or into having a panic attack. So I was really rearranging my life to accommodate not doing things that would acclimate triggers, which is the worst thing that you can do, because you're just giving it more power, because then you're afraid of pursuing things that are natural to pursue, but you are having an inappropriate response to an appropriate situation, which I think is what the clinical diagnosis of anxiety is, inappropriate response to an appropriate situation. And so eventually, the panic attacks kind of subsided. I was doing therapy at the time, and I was going to see a psychiatrist in St. Louis, which sucked because I had to drive 3.5 hours and then drive back the same day, and I had to do that twice a week. And I was rotating through several medications. I had to be hospitalized in the Marion Center, which is a mental institution, if you want to call that, or mental health facility.
It's a mental health facility.
I would say that. Mental institution makes it sound like it's something from the 50s where they do ESP.
Yeah, it's attached to one of the big hospitals here in Springfield.
Right. It's just a place to kind of monitor. And really, that was when I first understood what they were trying to do, because they force you into a routine. They force you into, you're going to get up and eat breakfast, then you're going to do group therapy, then you're going to do this. And at the time, I just thought, whatever, I don't care. I'm just here because I don't know what's happening to me, and this is crazy, you know? And the medications were just awful. And finally, I just got a diagnosis at the last time of just, we don't really know what it is. It sounds like it's OCD. It sounds like that's what you have, And then my psychiatrist said that. My therapist had said that. And this is just something that you're going to have to live with. And it was devastating to me, and at the same time infuriating, because I was like, fuck that, I'm not doing this. There's no way. There has to be a better answer. Mm-hmm. And I found this group in Britain. This guy had started this company. I don't remember what it's called. I think it's called the 9 Pillars or something. And it was a really interesting therapeutic process, because he himself went through massive panic attacks and clinical anxiety. And that was his whole structure, was your amygdala, which is responsible for your fear and anxiety levels, is out of control, and you've developed a habit of maintaining that it is set at a very high level because you're acknowledging it and letting it be at a high level. So in order to let it maintain a normal quote-unquote normal level, you need to reestablish better habits. And it's much more in-depth to that, but that's basically the bullet point, is like you needed to develop better habits. Now, trying to do all of that when you're completely exhausted is really tough, because you don't have the strength to really do anything, because you're just like, fuck, I'm just tired all the time. But I also can't sleep because I have insomnia, because I'm worried constantly. You just, nothing but worry all the time. Like, it sucks. But eventually I was able to, get a job and kind of maintain that. I was on medication at the time, and I just decided, like, I don't want to do that, and I have to kind of take some kind of direction of where I want to go. So my buddy at the time was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this school for audio engineering. And me being a musician and loving music as much as I do, I always wanted to be somehow involved in music, and I never thought that would be something that would be, I just never thought about it. Never thought that would be interesting or whatever. And I was like, wow, that sounds really cool. Awesome. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that. That just sounds cool. I need a break, maybe change of atmosphere and environment, and to try to pursue something I love, and just trying to push myself to do something, anything. Mm-hmm. And so when I got there, it was in Phoenix, Arizona. It was there, and then I just decided, like, while I was there, that I was just going to do everything I could to try and do what this 9 Pillars person and this therapy group in Britain had talked about. And so I was playing every time that I was not in class. I was either exercising, eating right, quote unquote eating right, and working on music. So I had like a flamenco guitar book, and I was like, I'm going to practice it, and I'm going to exercise, and I'm just going to do all these things and ignore the thoughts that are in my head. Ignore my own intuition that's telling me, stop this, go back to Springfield, go back to what we were doing before. Like that, all that internal dialogue is going on the whole time that I'm doing this, and I just have to ignore it, because it's like, that's not good for me. I can't do that. That's just a habit, like, reinforcing itself. And so it was painful to change that habit. It was not easy of just like, I'm just going to do this now. Like, it sucked, and it was hard, and it was tiring, and it was exhausting, but I didn't really have a choice, and I refused to let it just control my life any longer. And then, once I graduated at 23, I think you even commented on, like, wow, I've never seen you in this fashion before. Mm-hmm. Like, you are the best version of yourself that I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. Weight was down, happiness up, comfortability, confidence. Like, I'd never had that before in my life, when it's like, I found something that I've attached to. An identity that's not arrogance, it's not being condescending, it's not pretentiousness, it's just complete comfortability in my own skin with the choices that I've made. And it was just awesome. And that then just kind of led me through, like, what other challenges can I do here? And I wanted to pursue something like engineering again. It's just like, now let's just keep going, man. Like, this is a mountaintop. Like, let's just climb this mountain. Just do it one step at a time and just go for it. And then I won't succeed if I stop, but I will succeed if I just keep moving one foot in front of the other. And if it becomes an immovable object that I have to stop, then I can say, like, well, I made it up until this point. But I won't let myself stop because of whatever excuse. It's just like, no, I already know what it's like behind me, because I've been there. Yep. And it sucks. And I've tried, because I'm a very analytical person, to find the root cause. And that's the worst part about it, is that every time that you are in a cycle of depression and anxiety, you just sit there and think about why you are doing what you're doing. And you don't realize that you're creating a habit by thinking about these things that are basically meaningless and don't mean anything, but you attribute it to it. I mean, I had horrible identity crises, like, am I homosexual? Am I transgender? Am I, a serial killer? Like, all of these things that it's like, why am I freaking out about things that I'm never going to do and that I'm not? But it seems real, and why am I thinking these things? Like, sometimes you just got random thoughts, dude. Like, just chill out and just let random thoughts fucking roll off you like water on a duck. Like, just ignore the bullshit and focus on what you want to focus on. Like, focus on your task at what you want to do, and it helps just solidify you being the person that you want to be. I think the most succinct that I could possibly tell to anybody is that my view of life is that you are going down a river in a boat. And just like with any river, there will be obstacles in your way. There'll be rocks, there'll be trees, there'll be boulders, there'll be whatever. There will be things that you will have to maneuver around. if you sit in the boat and don't do anything, you eventually will run into those things. And you can be upset all you want that you ran into those things, but you are not choosing actively to move around those. But when you start picking up a row and a paddle and start directing yourself around those things, then you don't have to worry about things that are in your way. Yeah, they suck, but you can just maneuver around them, get past them, and then leave them behind you. Like, it's just about taking control of your day. I got 12 hours in a day. I mean, you have 24, but right. I have to sleep this much, and then what I'm going to do? I'm going to wake up, maybe I'll stretch, meditate, eat the food that I want to eat, that I think is good for me, that tastes good, go to work, get off work. I want to work on my hobbies, so I'm going to practice music for an hour and a half. I'm going to play with my dogs for an hour and a half. I'm going to eat dinner. I'm going to talk to Bridget for an hour and a half. I'm going to work on technical shit for either school or work or whatever, and then I'm going to stretch, and then I'm going to go to bed. Boom, done. And my whole day was just filled with everything that I want to do. There is no time for me to relish on things that I don't want. I don't have time for that shit. Mm-hmm. And that was really like the end of the day. It was like, that's how I got through it. It was just like, I don't have fucking time for this bullshit that's existing in my mind and forcing me to interact with it. I won't fucking stand for it. Like, it's time for me to take control and do exactly what I want all day.
Yeah.
And you get it, and you win. That's how you win. That to me is the secret in life of happiness, at least so far. It's just like, just take control of the boat.
Yeah.
Because it's happening whether or not you want it to or not. The boat is moving. Nothing stands still. Nothing. And you will always have obstacles. You either move around them on your own free will, or you run into it and you're like, why'd this happen? Why is this going on? I don't understand. It's like, take control of the boat and you can move around it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just stuck.
Yeah. Well, yeah, though that's super awesome, and thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
I, like I said, the reason that I wanted to talk about this book with you, and that I wanted for you to share that story is just that, depression and anxiety, whether it be rather minor or very, very significant. I have some people very close to me that's very significant for, and a lot of people feel really helpless, and I think that. And rightfully so, I get it.
I get that, man. I do. I've been there. It sucks.
And
sucks.
And the thing is that it's like, and that's kind of what the Power of Habit book also concludes, is that, all habits and all patterns are malleable, period. Like, there is not one that is just absolute.
Yeah.
However, an individual has to decide that they want to change those and to take that control.
Yeah.
And I think people feel, I think when people hear stuff like this, sometimes they feel like, well, now you're just telling me that it's my own fault. And that makes me feel even worse about it, right?
Yeah, right.
And it's like, that's not the point. The point is actually...
It's not blame.
It's not blame. It's actually empowerment.
Exactly.
Because you actually have control. It's not just happening to you.
No, yeah, exactly.
And things do happen to people, so I don't mean that everything is created or
that's
something.
That's why I didn't even remember how it started.
Yeah.
Like, it's just something that that's what sucks so bad about it at first, before you can position to that understanding, is that, like, you just feel like you're being attacked constantly by yourself. The worst feeling I've ever had in my entire life was that I wanted to run away from myself, and I realized I couldn't, and I was stuck. Like, that was when I realized, like, I'm in hell. Yeah. This is fucking hell. Because I want so badly to run out of my own skin. Literally run out of my own skin and get the fuck away from me.
Yeah.
And I can't, because I'm fucking trapped. To feel trapped in your own body is, I don't know, man, it's hell. It is. But on the swing side of that, like, happiness, true happiness for me is absolute love. And absolute love comes with everything that, I talked about of dissecting your day. Like, it makes you feel better about your interactions with people. You don't have to feel like competition is the name of the game. You don't have to feel like you're constantly like, well, fuck this guy and fuck that guy. Like, road rage goes down. Like, everything becomes different because you're comfortable with who you are. Not, I have to prove myself to the rest of the world. It's like, I don't give a fuck about that. Because the rest of the world doesn't give a fuck about me when my head is on the pillow. My head goes on the pillow, and everyone that's giving me love and support, thankfully I have a wonderful, family and friends network of people that always supported me. But I still had to go to bed on my own at the end of the day, and that's when it's the worst, because you're just alone with your thoughts and trying to like sleep, and it's terrible. So it's like, I have to fix this because I'm the one here now, not someone else.
Right.
This sucks. This is awful. I can't live like this.
Yeah. Like I said, for the past, couple of months, I've really been intending and very intentional in trying to develop new habits and doing this personal development stuff. And, I think that, the element that I talked about that they stress in that book, and that really, even though you didn't explicitly say it, that was present in your entire explanation that you gave, is that the belief is actually the first step. Like, the belief is actually the foundation. The belief... And again, it doesn't have to be belief in something spiritual or religion. It could be, but it just has to be a belief that things can be different.
Yeah, exactly.
And that things can change.
Whatever it takes for you to pursue that, then do it. Absolutely. As long as it's not harmful to other people, I don't really give a shit what you fucking do. I really don't. Believe what you want. Believe that flying spaghetti monster. Like, whatever. Don't care. Like, it doesn't matter. As long as it gets you to empower yourself to make your life better and your choices, go for it, man.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
And so, something I've stressed in the last a few recent episodes, and I continue to firmly believe, is that the best tool that I personally have found to build that belief, because it's hard to build the belief when you're in the midst of that cycle. Like, it's hard to get started.
Yeah.
And the best tool that I've found for it actually is daily affirmations. And it used to be something that I thought was cheesy, and it's like, well, I don't need to say stuff out loud to myself because I can just think it or something,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I actually don't think it's cheesy anymore, and do think there's an enormous amount of value in it. Now, again, to preface, doing affirmations doesn't make your anxiety go and depression go away. Going and just starting to exercise will not cure you. It's a combination of a lot of things. It's a combination of believing and changing routines and changing interactions and changing how you think about yourself. It's a lot of work. So I don't mean to trivialize it either, is my point. I don't mean to say, oh, here's this one thing you do and everything's better.
No.
But if the belief is the thing that you're struggling with, just start doing affirmations. Just start doing affirmations daily. And a thing that I hear people say a lot, and I said to myself actually until I had a conversation with a good buddy of mine who has been on this personal development journey for a long time and who was able to kind of give me some perspective, and I've shared this on a previous episode, but it's this idea where it's hard for me to do affirmations because it's not true. And I don't want to say, I can't say like, I love myself, because I don't. And it's like, yeah, the thing is though, is that, and so it's not true, so then I feel bad about it, except that, and this is harsh, but it's bullshit, because all of the other thoughts that you're having all day long that are feeding this depression and anxiety, those are also bullshit.
Yeah.
So
100%.
Being disingenuous with yourself was already on the table. Like, we're already willing to lie to ourselves. So this notion that we can't do positive things because, well, it's not true yet and I can't be a liar. Fuck that. You're already lying.
Yeah.
And it might be hard to hear that, or you might not want to think that about yourself. And I'm not saying that everyone is a liar. I don't mean that.
Yeah.
But it's just simply that our standard is not that everything we think about ourselves is true.
Yeah.
Because if that was the case, then we wouldn't have this bullshit and depression and anxiety stuff.
No, exactly.
And so let that go and just do the positive affirmations. And it will start out as a discipline thing where you're not going to be comfortable with it and it's going to feel weird, but just do it. And after a not very long period of time, I don't know how many days or weeks, some people are like, oh, it takes 21 days. I don't fucking know. It takes some amount of time.
It takes however long it takes for it to actually make a difference.
Yep.
That's how long it always takes.
It's not one time doing it. It's not 2 times doing it. I know that for sure. I know that it's not just a small dose of it that works. It is a consistency thing. But if you can do that, your beliefs will change. And what you'll find is that when you have those moments of self-talk, after you've established your routine of these affirmations, the voice that comes back that used to tell you, like, yeah, you are a piece of shit, is like, no, like, I love you. It's okay. Like, we can do it. And it's like, wow, I didn't know that I could be nice to myself. That's sweet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I to kind of, to wrap this up or land the plane, I guess, like I said, I think that the belief is the fundamental thing. And then after that, it really is habits. And I've talked about, both books now. I strongly recommend the book Discipline is Freedom if you're struggling with discipline. And I strongly recommend the book The Power of Habit for anybody, because it's a fascinating read.
Yeah, that sounds really cool.
Has a lot of really good insight.
Yeah. So just real quick to touch on one more thing that I didn't really talk about. Like, I did suffer really horribly through depression and anxiety, and that did come with a lot of suicidal tendencies. Like, that wasn't, like, something that I didn't encounter. Like, it was very much a life or death kind of thing. Like,
that's
I thought
what prompted you to go to the Marion Center.
Yeah. Twice I went there. And it was, the first time I had to be restrained in a hospital bed. And like, I remember that moment so vividly, because it was like, I can't believe this is my life. Like, what the fuck is happening to me?
Right.
Like, this is crazy. And it wasn't necessarily trying to kill myself because I obviously wanted to die, but I was just trying to just get it to end, because it was so fucking miserable.
Right.
It's just like, I just can't do this. If this is my life, this is unacceptable. And I just didn't want that. I really didn't want it to end like my life. I just wanted it to stop. Like, it just, like, this has to find some way to stop, and medication helped, and it does, and I'm certainly not going to undermine, like, psychiatry profession of, like, administering medication to people if they need it, because I, am not in that position to comment. But for me personally, I got an absolute 100% cure from changing my structure of my day to reaffirming things that I wanted. Like, seeing the results as a happening, that was kind of the thing that I struggled with, what you're talking about. Like, how long does it take? Like, people are so, how do I lose weight in 30 days? And how do I lose this much pounds? Like, just do the work will work to get you to your weight goal, and you will see that it will happen. It may just not get you in time for a quote-unquote beach season, but that doesn't fucking matter. What matters is that you get there, because when you get there, you're going to feel better about the time that you spent getting there.
Well, like you shared earlier, don't look at the top of the hill and see how far away it is.
Exactly.
Just look down in front of you and just worry about being in the moment.
One step at a time.
Yeah. No, I think that's really powerful, and you're absolutely right.
Because it's easy to do that. It's easy to just put one foot in front of the other. It's incredibly difficult to look at, like, Everest and be like, God damn, I can't climb that thing.
It's funny because there's all these cliches that we've all heard, and maybe it's because they're cliches that they don't resonate, but it's, you eat an elephant one bite at a time, or the journey of 1,000 steps begins with one, and it's all that,
There's all the motivational pictures,
But I mean, but it's all literally the exact same concept. It's
really
not
is.
any different,
It sounds like it needs to be more, profound or like complicated, but it's really not. It's just like, you just gotta take control of the boat, man.
I obviously also am not qualified to really say this, because I'm not a medical professional and I'm not a scientist and I'm a doctor and whatever, but I actually do just fundamentally believe that the drugs are not the answer. Now, I'm not saying that there's never a place for a drug to help out, just for someone to, like, maybe get to a little more stable position so that they can do things.
Right, exactly.
But the drugs are not the end answer.
Exactly.
It's just not. I've known a lot of people that have suffered from this, and anyone that's gotten through it, like you, has gotten through it by changing themselves.
Yep.
And anyone who I've known that has tried to just rely on the drugs, they're unfortunately they're still in the same boat. It doesn't.
It's kind of like a bucket, and it has a hole in the bottom, and the water is drained out of it. The drugs will help put water back into the bucket, but there's still a hole in the bottom. Like, it's still gonna pour out. Like, you can keep doing it, and you will have to do it every day because that's what you're doing. But you're just supplying yourself. You're supplying yourself with a chemical that you are missing, and that is the clinical treatment. Is that, like, it sounds like you're missing a lot of X, Y, or Z, whatever.
Right.
So we're going to put that back into your body. That way your body has it, then your body will function normally. But the hole in the bucket is still there and still draining me of whatever it is.
Right.
I don't know if it's literally doing that, but that's the best way that
that's a really good analogy.
That's how I felt. It was just like, Yeah, I'm not actually solving the problem, though. I'm just filling the bucket up, but it still has a bunch of holes, so I need to patch the holes before I can fill the bucket.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for joining today and having this conversation with me. The book was really significant to me, and it's really cool that you happened to be in town this weekend. I mean, I just finished it like Wednesday.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Nice.
And so I was planning to do an episode about it by myself, but then when you showed up, it was like, oh man, well, we've got to talk about that because for so long you've talked about, again, not to be punny or something, but the power of habit. You know what I mean? Yeah. Even though you weren't talking about that book,
right?
You've for a long time talked about that, and so I've really thought a lot about the conversations we've had through the years about that.
Divine intervention.
Yeah, that's what we'll call it. Fucking Virgin Mary over here, folks. Anyway, yeah, thanks again, Misha, and yeah.
My pleasure, man.
Terrified of the salmon, my fear got the best of me. Paranoia running, this circus without the ring. I need to find an escape, a way out of my skin. For the hours wasted away, there's a cycle in the begin.
All right, folks, well, that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you so much again for listening, and thank you, Misha Zarins, for stopping by to have this conversation. Again, the book is called The Power of Habit, and remember, you can always email me at Walkshow Podcast if you've got any questions, comments, anything like that. You can also follow me on Twitter at The Walkshow Pod, Facebook and Instagram at The Walkshow, and get updates on when episodes are coming out and all that sort of stuff. Again, thanks for listening. Have a great week.